I'll just jump right into what we're going to talk about. We're talking about giving professional power to your email. They're a bit more casual, email and text, the more casual forms of written communication. Hopefully these 10 etiquette tips will help you increase your professionalism in your written communication. I'm still having some technical difficulties, so I apologize for that. So we're going to be using thumbs up a few times. So in your participant box, you should be able to find that probably under the ellipsis. So go ahead and give me a thumbs up if you found that. That one thumbs up, there's another. And since we have a small group, I guess it's not a big deal if you want to just use chat instead with this either, but you're going to use the thumbs up a few times, so kind of keep that handy. Before we get started, these Power Hour sessions are free professional development trainings. They're held the first Wednesday of every month at noon Eastern Standard Time. To access next month's Power Hour, you follow the same directions to access that you used to access this session. If you want to book a full or online course, just reach out to whomever told you about this Power Hour session and they can give you the information you need for that. Or you can contact me. There's my email, and I'll make sure you get the information that you need. In the chat, I believe I know where everyone is watching from today, but go ahead in the chat because we're going to use it a lot just so you know where it is and you have it handy. Just tell me where you are watching from today. Sheila's in Southgate, over by Detroit, right? Yes. Rex is in Marcellus. And
I don't know how to do that.
You don't know how to do that. Oh, the chat is in the, if you look at your Zoom bar at the top, sorry, I meant to say this. If you click on more, you'll be able to see the chat, and then it should, you click on that and it should pop up, and then you can type your message.
Okay. Oh, okay, gotcha. Oops.
And it says type message here, and it should say to everyone. You can do it for specific people if you want, but we're just gonna do it to everyone.
Okay.
You find it?
Well, I found the thumbs up.
Oh, all right, cool. That's all right. We can use the audio also, just because there's few enough people that we can do most of it by audio, so we'll do that. So go ahead and get started. Before we get into the tips, I wanted to talk about what good professional communication is. So for the past 30 years, or over the past 30 years, I've worked in nonprofit, journalism, advertising, education, business, history, so a lot of different areas. I've gone from no internet in college, didn't have internet, did research the old-fashioned way, to internet like we have it today. I've gone from no email to email prolific like we have it today, and then cell phones that were non-existent to the gigantor cell phones to the smartphones that we have today. So I've seen a lot of changes. And texting also. Texting obviously didn't exist, and now we use it like crazy today. So I've seen a lot of changes in how we communicate in business. But I've also seen a decrease in professionalism with a more casual approach to the workplace. So casual isn't necessarily bad, but it should result in a lack of professionalism. So if you had to describe professionalism or professional communication, and you can just unmute it and tell me if you'd like, how would you describe, like what word would you use to describe professional communication or professionalism? How would you describe it?
I think direct.
Direct word. Elevated level. It's good. I like it. So it's both of those things. It's also somewhat difficult to define. So if you're struggling defining it, that's okay. Because it is difficult to define because it's a lot of different things. In Writing Well for the Technical Professional, it's a technical communication textbook. They define good professional communication as writing or speaking that is accurate, complete, and understandable to its audience, that tells the truth directly and clearly. So it included both of those things. The elevated level, that directness is in there, but it's a lot of different things. So keeping that definition in mind, the 10 tips are really going to help you drive toward that level of professionalism in your text and email, and really in your written communication, because it can apply to those as well. So let's get into the tips. Tip number 1, use a process. So all of the other tips are going to really fit into this tip. It really involves thinking about what you write before you write it and before you make it public. So it's very basic. It's plan, write, and complete. So planning is thinking about what you're going to write. It might be some brainstorming. It might just be thinking about it. It may be, jotting down some notes, whatever. It can be a lot of different things. And then actually writing, and then completing it, which involves editing, revision. Again, a lot of different things that it could contain. It's not write and send, which is what most people do, right? Most people write and then send the message without any of those extra steps in there. So always use a process. Everyone's going to do this process a bit uniquely, but it should always contain these 3 parts: plan, write, and complete. So you'll be able to take all the tips that we're going to discuss and really fit them into this process. And using a process definitely add professional power because you're thinking about what you're doing before you're actually sending it. Tip number 2, always edit, always. This means having an editing strategy, and it fits in the part of the complete process in the process that we just talked about. And again, your editing strategy is going to be unique to you. Everybody does it a bit differently, but there are some elements that everyone will share, that everyone will do in this process. And within that, you need to stop blaming autocorrect. Now, maybe it's just me, but and it's often a problem in text than it is in email, but give me a thumbs up if you've ever sent a text that had an embarrassing mistake in it and you blamed it on autocorrect. Has anyone ever done that but me? See, one person at least admitted to doing it. Yep, there's another. We all have, right? And really, if it comes down to just not editing well enough, or at all, I'm guilty of it, hitting send before I've actually taken the time to edit. Secondly, we need to slow down. Those last-minute emails and texts, right, that you just quick send out at the end of the day or before lunch or before a meeting or whatever, often they're going to include some mistakes that, had you taken the time to edit, they wouldn't be in there. So if you don't have time to edit, even just a quick edit, which I'm going to give you a tip on how to do that, you shouldn't send it. So that quick tip, read out loud. It's the best quick method, especially for a quick email, a quick text, but really any written communication. If you can read it out loud and feel goofy reading it, thinking people in the cubicle next to you can hear you, just kind of whisper it to yourself. That's what I do. But it's a great way to catch really most of your mistakes. We're going to practice that here in a second. But before that, let's get into the 4th tip, improve grammar, spelling, and punctuation. Now, most people go, oh, I don't want to do that. And it's not a lot of fun for most people, but it is important. There are a lot of apps. There's a lot of online resources. You can take a class. There's just a lot that you can do to practice your grammar, your spelling, and your punctuation. It takes time and effort, but it's definitely well worth it, and it will definitely elevate your professionalism in your written communication. So we're going to practice this reading out loud to edit. I'm going to show you an email. It's got 5 typos in it, so I've given you a goal. I'll give you 30 seconds to find those 5 errors. You don't have to put anything in chat, just kind of mentally note them. And then I'll show you the errors. So I'm going to show you the email, or yeah, it's an email, and see if you can find the 5 errors.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide and show you the errors. So did you spot the 5 errors? Does anyone think they got all 5? Here they are. The won't should have an apostrophe. On should be in March. Attached should be past tense, should have an ed. Prize should be price, although prize would be kind of fun, right? Information should not have an S on the end of it. So did anybody get all 5? Or at least a few of them? So hopefully just reading it out loud, right, helped you find those 5 errors. It's a great way to find the majority of, good job. I've got several people that got all 5, some got 4. So reading out loud is a great way to find these errors. Especially if you don't have a lot of time, it can be just a quick way to find the majority of errors. No one's going to be completely error-free, and if you're like me, it drives you absolutely crazy that you're not, but no one is. But this is a great way to get really the majority of your mistakes. Tip number 3, craft subject lines carefully. Good subject lines matter, and here's why. A lot of reasons. First, they make a first impression. They really set the tone for the rest of your email. They get messages noticed. They may determine when or even if a message gets read. They get your messages filtered properly. So a lot of people get a lot of email. If you're like most of the people I know, there's just too much to even manage. So having a good subject line helps them not only find it, but keep their messages organized. And it also gives focus to your message. So as the writer, if you can craft a good subject line, it's going to help you focus in the body of the message and in what you want to say, because you're going to focus on explaining what is in that subject line and giving the details on it. So it's a good way to focus you as the writer of that email. So I've got some example subject lines. You can go ahead and give me a thumbs up if you think it's a good subject line. If you don't, you can give a thumbs down if you want. But there's just 3 of them, and then we'll talk about them afterwards after I read them. So the first one, requesting Project X idea submissions due January 15th. So good or bad, what do you think? Okay, I've got some thumbs ups on that one. The second one, meet about social media strategy Tuesday. What do you think of that one? Okay, not liking that one so much. And then the last one, free to catch up over coffee next week. Okay, like that one. So they're all pretty clear, they're concise, they're specific. What was it, for those of you who put a thumbs down for the second one, the me about the social media strategy, what didn't you like about that one?
It was too vague.
It's too vague, okay. Wasn't specific enough. So sure, it could have had too wishy-washy, was not a date and time. Okay, so it could have more detail. All right, good. So you can see how a specific, concise, clear subject line is important. It's going to direct the email. So what's interesting also about subject lines is that aren't they a lot like what a text should be, right? So a good subject line is not so different from a good text. A text might be a little bit longer, but really they're very similar. So this clear, concise, and specific, these good subject lines are really similar to what a good text would be. So just something to keep in mind and how much they are alike and connected. Our next tip, tip number 4, avoid going on and on. In other words, be concise. Professional communication doesn't ramble. It gets to the point, it's clear, it's direct. This means avoid being too detailed, complex, or confusing. So the level of detail really depends a lot on the context. It depends on the audience, but in general, emails and text should not have a lot of detail in them. There's other ways to handle that detail, which we'll talk about. And then avoid the never-ending message. That's the back and forth message. It gets confusing and overwhelming and pointless, right? At some point, after 20 or so back and forth, you really don't know what the original message was about. So that continual back and forth, that going on and on, you want to avoid that also. So I've got an example email. I'm not expecting you to read this. I just kind of want you to visually look at it. And really, you don't have to read it to see what the problem is. So let me just show it to you. I'm not even going to give you enough time to read it because that's not the point. So here's the first part of it. Okay, so there's a lot of information there. Maybe it doesn't seem like too much, but wait, there's more. Okay, this is the next part of that email. And I could have given probably 5 more slides before showing all of the email. There are a lot more screenshots and a lot more information. So this email is simply too long, it's too detailed, right? But sometimes you do have a lot of information that you need to give someone, and you are using text, or you're using, in this case, email. So what can you do instead? So if you have all that detail that you need to send to someone, what are some other options instead of having the endless email or the back and forth email? What are some other options that might work better? Document, I'm assuming you mean an attachment. A phone call, an attachment, exactly. And you're hitting exactly what's on my list. So the first thing on my list is pick up the phone. Calling someone saves a lot of time and makes things clear, right? So instead of including all that detail in the email, or after about I think someone told me the third back and forth, just pick up the phone and call. Hold a video conference or a meeting, right? Sometimes, in an example that I just showed you, that's what was needed. A meeting to discuss this information, to discuss the problem. And then there's always, you can get up and walk, right? Go and see the person, visit them. Although now it's a bit different, but as we're getting back to work, we need exercise anyway, right? I mean, who doesn't? So get up and walk and go see this person. Go see the person that you need to talk to. What's interesting is that all of these additional options, they add nonverbal cues, which are essential to good communication. I mean, written communication is great. Email and text are great for communicating in ways that we just couldn't before, but they don't have those nonverbal cues. And adding those in are really going to clarify your message and up your professionalism in your written communication. In other words, sometimes the most professional email and text is the one that you never send, right? So tip number 5, mix the emotion. So a professional does not get emotionally hijacked, but you can't avoid being emotional either, right? So what do? Wait. Let the emotion subside before sending that text or email. So we're going to do another thumbs up. Have you ever sent an email or a text that you later, maybe immediately, regretted sending? Anyone besides me? Well, of course, we all have. I hate it when I do that. I just ruminate about it, well, let's be honest, for a few days after, usually. So waiting is often just a great idea to let that emotion subside, and then you can make a better choice with what you're going to say, or often not send it at all, right? And then there are the emojis, the all caps, and lots of exclamation points that we think we need to include to express that emotion. I mean, we need to face it. I know everybody well enough in here to know none of us are teenagers, right? We're not texting our mom or spouse or a bestie, right? So all these emojis, these ways that we think we need to express emotion in our text and email, they're just not professional. So if you feel something needs emotional expression, it probably shouldn't be sent in a text or email. It probably, again, should be face-to-face, a phone call, meeting, something like that. Tip number 6, reduce acronyms and jargon. This gets at a professional tone. It also gets back to the point of we're not teenagers, right? Our goal is professional communication. We need to use full sentences. Now, all companies have their own jargon and acronyms, so I get that they're going to be used to some extent. An audience is a big key in when and how to use them. And we don't have time to really get into detail on how that might play out examples. But I can give you an example from years ago. I started in a position where I was a liaison between a community college and the business and industry in the surrounding community. I also worked with service providers. And I remember in that first 3 months, there were a lot of acronyms and jargon coming at me from every direction. I had no idea what they were talking about most of the time. I wanted to make a sort of guide, but there were just too many of them and it would have been impossible to do. It took me about 3 months to really get a handle on what they were talking about. So I'm really sensitive to this use of acronyms and jargon in text and email, because it can just be really confusing to some people who don't know what they are, who may be new to a company or lots of different situations. So I've got a quiz, and I thought it would be fun to have a little competition. All it is, I'm just going to show you some jargon and acronyms. They're not difficult. They're general ones because I didn't want to, make it unfair, have a certain business or whatever. So they're pretty general. So just give an answer in chat, or if you want to think audio is quicker for you, that's fine. Just who can first come up with sort of interpreting what these jargon or acronyms are. Here's the first one.
In my opinion.
In my opinion, very good. I'm not sure who said that, but good. Next one. Anybody? I know none of these. Hey, love it. I didn't either. So that's why I picked them. This one is out of office. Okay, here's the next one. Anybody? End of day. End of day, all right. Hey, you got one. Okay, here's more jargon than it is an acronym. Anybody know what boil the ocean means? This was a new one for me. No? Okay. Do the impossible. And here's the last one. Pick the low-hanging fruit.
Whatever is easiest.
Say it again.
Whatever is easiest.
Whatever is easiest, but choose the simplest option. Exactly. So there's a ton of jargon and acronyms out there, and I didn't even pick any specific industry. So you're not going to get rid of it 100%, but really need to think about your audience. Are they going to know what you're talking about? And really taking it out of your written communication is going to make it more professional. So I've got an example text as another way of looking at this idea of jargon and acronyms. So I'm just going to put it out there and just tell me what you think about it. It's clear, right? The meaning's clear. It's concise, right? But it's still not professional. Why is it still not professional? I mean, it's clear and it's concise, it's totally unprofessional, exactly. It sounds like a teenager, doesn't it? It's a lazy tone and it's simply unprofessional, and yet it's something that probably we've all seen from an adult and a professional. I don't understand it, okay? It's not understandable if you're not used to the acronyms and jargon. So even with a text, we need to use full sentences and professional communication. Oh, late, yeah, it means late. I'm reading the chat and commenting on it verbally, and I just realized you may not know what I'm doing when I do that. So even with text, use full sentences for professional communication. Doing so is going to make you stand out. Let me give you an example of how this happened with me. My son, he's in college now. He's a senior now in college, but when he was in high school, he ran cross country. He came home one day and said his cross country coach thought I was one of the most intelligent people that he knew. And immediately a red flag went up because I know a lot of people that he knows, and believe me, I'm not one of the most intelligent. He knows a lot of intelligent people. So I got to talking more to my son about this. And apparently in my text that I would send the coach, just using complete sentences, using proper grammar and punctuation, made me appear more intelligent. It really stood out to him. Now, granted, he texted a lot of teenage boys also, but still, it did stand out to him because I used complete sentences, because I used good spelling, grammar, and all of that. So it does make you stand out. Tip number 7, be clear and concise. Email and text are most effective when they contain simple, clear messages. And when they only give the necessary information. So as someone said earlier, just being direct, being clear, not including extra information. In other words, avoid information overload. You need to stick to the basics and then use other forms of sending detailed information when that's needed. So in the email or text, it needs to be pretty basic. And we'll talk about how to add detail or send detail here in a second. But information overload is really a problem. People get a ton of email, a ton of text, a ton of information, a lot to read, and we don't want to contribute to that, right? So one way to do that is really to be more professional in especially our email, but in how many texts we send also. So thinking about techniques for email, we can use attachments. Attachments are a great way to send additional details in a less overwhelming way. You can have a direct, concise email, refer to the attachment, and people are going to get the main information. They're going to know the details are there, and it's just going to help with avoiding information overload for them, and it's still going to get our main point across. You can also use bullets and numbering. It's a great way to make your email clear, to make your points stand out, to make your main points, your main ideas more clear. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. But using visual ways, some white space can also help with that, to make your email more clear, more concise, because people can read it better, right? So essentially, we need to keep topics to a minimum, whether you're texting or whether you're emailing. With text, really one point at a time. You don't want to include multiple points in a text. They're probably not going to all get answered. So for text, one point at a time. Email, you can have multiple points, but it does need to be limited. In general, it's probably going to be 2 or 3 points, but really you still need to stay concise and keep it minimal. And we'll talk more about kind of those same points on another point here in a minute. But first, I have a sample text exchange that I again want to show you. I want you to read through it on your own, and then just, either verbally or you can type it in the chat. Just let me know what you think of it as far as what we've talked about so far. Is it professional? Is it clear? Is it concise? So go ahead. I'll give you about 30 seconds to read through it. What do you think of this text exchange? It's clear and concise. I would agree. Anything else you notice about it? It sticks to 1 point per text, right? Each text that each person sent is 1 point. It stays on topic. It's definitely professional. Uses a document attached. So it was exactly that's what I was going to say next. It shows how text and email can be used together, right? It shows how you can have a simple, clear text and then follow up with it with details in an email. So it's a great way to use in conjunction, and it really opens up a lot of ideas if you think of all the different options we've talked about as far as meetings and phone calls, text, email, how you can use them together to get the information across without being too overwhelming and too detailed in your text or email. So now I've got a sample email message that I kind of want you to do just the same thing with. I'll give you about 30 seconds to read through it, and then in the comments, or again, you can do it verbally if you'd like, just let me know what you think of it. So any thoughts on this email? Is it professional? Does it need improvements? What do you think of it? Complex, complicated, too many code words, okay. So it would be helpful to know the audience for this, right? So maybe the audience of this message, the person sending it knew the person would understand that, right? So knowing the audience, which we're going to talk about here in a few minutes in our last point, is definitely plays into this. But it is direct and concise. Yes, the email is definitely direct and concise. I think this example doesn't preserve the relationship very well. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Sheila. Can you explain it?
Yeah, again, it depends on the audience, but there are some people, and I'm talking about, say it in a multicultural organization where you want to say, hi, John, how are you doing today? I just have a little bit of information. So you're like adding context to the email to help preserve the relationship and not like immediately getting down to the brass tacks where it's all business all the time type of thing.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense. I understand exactly what you're saying now. So right, sometimes, and again, it does depend on audience. And in fact, that's why the last point is going to address audience, because audience is everything when it comes to this. I mean, we don't know the context. Perhaps in this situation, it was perfectly fine to not have that softening, so to speak, of the email message. But in a lot of cases, it does need to be there. It does need to kind of have that softer aspect to it, more conversational aspect. That's a great point. I will say the bullets, I think, help. I think the colors help. I think it makes it clear. It makes the point stand out. I think the white space helps also. It's right on the verge of too much information, right? So beyond this, you'd want to talk in person or on the phone or have a meeting. So it has a lot of good things about it. But again, the context and the audience is really going to determine whether or not this was an effective email. So let's go on to our next tip. Tip number 8, know who to include. So this gets at being courteous, which is obviously important in professionalism. And it involves taking time, again, to consider your audience. It also can reduce information overload by not including unnecessary people. We've all been on the other end of that, right? We've been sent email, carbon copied, whatever, that we just didn't need the information. And it is one of the reasons that our inboxes get overloaded. So let's consider our options and just kind of go through each of those. So reply. Reply is when only the sender needs to know, and most people are pretty good at using reply. I don't think there's a lot of problems with that, except for it does come into play kind of when, sorry about that. It does come into play when we're choosing with the other options. So only when the sender needs to know. Obviously, we know that's when you use reply. The problem, I think, comes in often with reply all. We want to use it only if it's relevant to everyone. So I think a lot of people need to just take the time to look at, when they hit reply all, does everyone really need to receive this information? There needs to be a reason that every single person on there needs to receive it. If not, they need to be taken off the list. Let me give you an example of how this reply all can get out of control, though we've probably all experienced it. When I was taking master's classes at a online university, over 17,000 students, the university sent out an email to the student body. One person hit reply all and asked a question. And then some people hit reply all to answer a question. Other people hit reply all to tell her why she shouldn't have hit reply all. And then eventually it turned into this big joke, and it went on for 3 days. So over 17,000 people received this. So you can imagine it got pretty annoying after a while because everyone kept hitting reply all. So reply all can easily get out of control, and you need to really stop and think about whether or not everyone on that list needs the information. Carbon copy. Use this to inform, but no reply is needed. Again, we need to really consider, does the person need this information? Because a lot of people get carbon copied or CC'd, we might call it, and they don't need the information. So you really need to think about it and then offer an explanation for why you're sending it to them if it's not clear. If say you haven't talked on the phone or haven't texted and said, hey, I'm going to copy you on something. And then we have blind carbon copy. It's rarely okay to use this. Perhaps in the example I gave you with the reply all situation to the student body, probably then blind carbon copy would have been okay to use. Just impersonal information being sent, like maybe a change of address or selling a dresser or something like that, to a lot of people who don't know each other. It's simply informational, but in most cases, it's going to be considered pretty shady to use, right? Then we have group text. Now, let me just say from the beginning that I am not a fan of group text. The general rules are, though, to get permission before you include someone on a group text, right? You need to stick to the purpose of the group text and don't go on side trips or side conversations and don't talk to just one person. I mean, we've had all of those things happen. Again, I'm not a fan of group texts because most of the time they get out of control. But instead of me just sort of harping on that, I've got a quote from Jace Robertson to just kind of explain how I feel and how a lot of people feel about group texts and how we really need to think about how we're using them and really have some etiquette while we're using them. So Jace Robertson says, group texts are the worst. They're like a terrible technological snowball coming down a mountain and you can't stop it. First, one person responds, then someone tries to be funny, then we get off the subject. What was the original conversation? No one knows. No one cares. Stop having a conversation on my phone. Does anyone else feel this way about group texts at times? Give me a thumbs up if you've experienced that. I definitely have. We need to use them sparingly. We need to know that they can easily get out of control and need to really stick to the guidelines that we just talked about regarding group texts. Okay, tip number 9, consider timing. This gets at courtesy, and that's definitely a part of being professional. Timing is definitely unique to the person, and what I mean by timing is, when do you send a text? Do you send an email instead? Should you call them instead? It's really all part of planning and asking how quickly do I want a response to the information or from that person, right? So as an example, let me give you what one millennial, I just found this in an article, offers these guidelines and says, if you want to get a hold of me or get me some information, this is what you should do. So and it includes more than just text and email, but it still, I think, makes the point well, and it'll feed into our last point, I think, well also. So this person says, when you want to get back to me in 30 minutes or so, then please phone me. In around 2 hours, then please send me a text message. Later today or tomorrow, then please send me an IM, which is instant message. In a couple of days, then please send me an email. Whenever convenient, then please send me a DM, direct message, or tweet. So what do you think of this? Does anyone have any comments on this person's particular approach to timing with text and email.
It's a good idea to have those boundaries and those parameters. But that's just a whole
Say that
lot
again?
of stuff. I said that's
It's a
a
whole
good idea to have those boundaries and those parameters, but it's a whole lot of stuff. Like there's a whole lot of
Right.
things to be aware of there. IMs, DMs, tweets. I mean, above and beyond the standard phone call, text message, email.
Right, it's confusing. It's kind of humorous that a person decided, hey, this is how you can get a hold of me, how you can best get a hold of me, right?
Yeah, it's like too much information.
Right, it's too much information, but this is what this person set forth. And really, it's a part of a couple of things came to mind when I saw this. Everybody's different. I mean, you can set out these guidelines, but every person that you're going to interact with is going to be slightly different. So there's really there are no guidelines, right? Nothing we set out, like a standard that we set out, is really going to fit for everybody. Texts aren't immediate for everyone. Some people just don't check email as much as others. So it's hard to have guidelines when it comes to timing. But we do need to think about timing, and it really feeds into audience, right? Know your audience well. What's the best way to get them the information? How quickly do I want to respond to them? And to really think about it and think about your interactions with that person, if you've had any, before you decide, okay, do I need to email? Do I need to text? Do I need to call? And just put some thought into what's the best way to communicate with them. So with that, all of our tips really fed into this. Developing audience awareness is our last tip, tip number 10. So just, as I said, just like our first tip, all the other tips are connecting to this one. I've mentioned it several times, and being professional certainly means communicating so your audience will understand. So audience awareness is not only crucial, but it's a continual challenge. So if you feel like, man, that's a bit overwhelming, well, it can be overwhelming, and you just have to realize that it's something you get better at with practice. It's a big part of the planning process. You think, okay, who am I sending this to? What's the best way to get them the information? How quickly do I want to respond? So it's really thinking about these things, especially with people that maybe you don't communicate with quite as much, or how important is the information? There's a lot of factors that come into play. So to help you get started, I've got a list of questions that you can just kind of help you decide. And this fits not just with text and email, it really fits with any type of communication, especially written communication. The whole point of it is to just think about your audience, think about who you're communicating with, and what's the best way to communicate with them. So who are they? Of course, you need to think about who are they, what are their positions, what are they doing, what are their goals, their knowledge, their experience, their training. So you can think of things like jargon is going to play into this. Are they going to understand what the jargon or the acronyms that I'm using? Their needs and interests, the demographics. Culture can really play a role in this, a whole other side topic that we could get on. And past correspondence really helps. There's a lot of factors that go into play into audience awareness. And just building relationships, getting to know people, how they communicate best is really the best way to get better at analyzing your audience and being aware of how to best communicate with them. For example, with some people, I know just from past experience that sending them a text, alerting them to an email that I've sent is the best way to get them to see the email, or they're just not going to read it. They just don't check email that often. With some people, I know texting's not the best way to get a hold of them. During the workday, they don't look at their phone as much. They're really on their computer and looking at emails more than anything. So just really assessing and just being aware of your audience and knowing that it changes from person to person is important in being professional in your communication. So we're going to practice that a little bit. We're just going to do one quick practice. And talk about how audience might impact the details that you include, the frequency of your message, and the use of jargon and acronyms. So let me just do an example. I'll do an example, and then I'll throw out another one for you guys to give me your input on. So say you work in a small business, You worked there 10 years and you want to communicate something about a project to your boss, who's been your boss for the past 10 years. When you think of details, frequency, and use of jargon or acronyms, I mean, really in a small business, face-to-face is easy, right? And he's likely close by. So you're probably going to do a lot of talking face-to-face. You're not going to send a lot of email and text. It's just not going to be as necessary, right? And it's probably going to be a lot more work than it is just getting up and talking to each other. Jargons and acronyms are probably okay because both, again, 10 years, Ben are going to know what the jargons and the acronyms are. And you're both going to be able to use them fluently and understand each other. So let me throw out another example to you and think about how this audience influences the details, the frequency, how much are you going to email or text them, and the use of jargon or acronyms. So say you have a newly hired employee, and really the size of the business doesn't matter, but just a newly hired employee in any business. How does that impact the details of frequency and the use of jargons or acronyms in the email and text and your communication with them? You would be far more detailed, for sure. They're going to need a lot more detail. In person is probably best, you're right, exactly. And maybe follow up with an email or a text. And you're going to communicate far more, right? The frequency is going to be a lot more with a new person, exactly. What about the use of jargon and acronyms with a new person? You have to explain them, exactly. They're not going to know. Either that or avoid them, definitely. I go back to my example of when I worked for the community college with the businesses. I had no clue what they were talking about. And it is overwhelming. So you get the point. You get the idea of how audience is going to change how you're going to communicate with email and text, how much you're going to use it. And audience plays a big impact and a big role in all of the tips that we talked about. It really requires a lot more practice than we have time for today. It takes building relationships. It is an ongoing effort, but it is crucial. So it is something to continually be working on. So just to conclude, I hope these 10 tips for increasing professional power in text and email were helpful. I wanted to close out just by talking about specifically what professionalism does for you. We've talked about what it is, given a lot of examples of what it looks like, but I want to just close out by saying, what does it do for you? It increases respect. It shows that you respect others because you've thought about your messages and you've thought about the best way to be clear with your messages. It shows leadership because it increases your effectiveness, right? As a leader, if you can communicate better, you're going to be seen as a more effective leader. It promotes success. It shows that you care about the work that you do, and that's going to promote your success. It definitely creates credibility. If people know you can be relied upon to communicate professionally and do that consistently, you're going to definitely be more credible. It improves your communication. It's clear, concise, correct email and text is good communication, and you're going to appear more professional. Then it sets you apart. In a perhaps too casual world, a little professionalism is going to make you stand out. I've seen that myself, and I'm sure you've all seen that as well. So before I get into just time to take questions and answers and chat if you'd like, I wanted to talk just a second about the full course of professional written communication. We'd get into more of developing a process and how that's unique to the person, and I would help each person develop their own process, find out what that is. The same with editing. We talk about some standard editing techniques, but also how to kind of tailor that to the person. We get into grammar. I try to make grammar fun, though I'm not sure that's possible. I personally think it's fun, but we would get into that because it does affect the professionalism of your written communication. And then we get more into audience analysis because, as you probably saw in talking about it, there's a lot to it. There's a lot to think about with it. So we would get more into that. And then I also wanted to remind you that the free Power Hour sessions are the first Wednesday of every month, Eastern Standard Time at noon. You just, the same way you access this one, you access all of them. And if you want to book a fuller online course of this or any of the sessions, just reach out to whoever gave you the information on this particular session. So thank you for attending. Sorry about the technical difficulties in the beginning. I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, go ahead, you can type them in the chat or just unmute yourself and we can chat about it also. So thank you.